Hello everyone. So far we've spent a lot of time celebrating the efficiency of the perfectly competitive market. We know it achieves a great outcome. Price equals marginal cost, and social surplus is maximized. But, and this is a big but, the real world is messy. Today, we're going to look at the cases where the market fails to deliver this efficient, optimal outcome. A market failure simply means the market mechanism leads to an inefficient allocation of resources. We end up producing too much or too little of something from society's point of view. There are 5 major categories of market failure that we need to understand. The first case, monopoly and imperfect competition. Our perfect model assumes we have thousands of small firms competing. But what if we only have one or a few? When a market is dominated by a monopoly, one seller, or oligopoly, a few sellers, the firm gains market power. This means they don't have to take the market price. They can set the price. What does a monopolist do? They restrict output to drive the price up. They set a price that is higher than their marginal cost. What then is the market failure? The quantity produced is too low, and the price is too high, leading to what we call a deadweight loss. This is output that society wants and could have efficiently produced, but the monopolist prevented it to maximize profit. How to fix it? Antitrust laws and regulation to break up or control these powerful firms. The second case, public goods. This failure is about things that are consumed collectively, like national defense or clean air. Public goods have 2 critical characteristics. Non-rivalrous. One person using the good doesn't prevent or reduce the ability of others to use it. For example, watching a fireworks show. Non-excludable. It is impossible or very costly to prevent someone from using the good once it exists. For example, streetlights. Because they are non-excludable, we run into the free rider problem. You can benefit without paying for it. If everyone tries to free ride, no one has the incentive to pay, and the market simply won't produce the good at all, or it will produce a severely insufficient amount. The failure. The market provides too little or none of the public good, even though society would benefit greatly from it. The fix. The government must step in, collect taxes, and use those funds to provide the public good. The third case, externalities. An externality occurs when an action taken by a consumer or a firm affects a third party who was not involved in the transaction, and they are not compensated or charged for that effect. We have 2 types. Negative externality. When an activity imposes a cost on a third party. The classic example is pollution from a factory. The factory pays for labor and materials, but it doesn't pay for the cost of pollution damage to the community's health. What is then is the failure. The factory produces too much of the good, because its private cost is lower than the true social cost. Positive externality. When an activity provides a benefit to a third party. A good example is vaccination or basic research. The failure. The market produces too little of the good because the private benefit is lower than the true social benefit. How to fix it? We use tools like Pigouvian taxes to discourage negative externalities and subsidies to encourage positive ones. The fourth case, asymmetric information. The perfect market model assumes we all have perfect information, but what if one side of a transaction knows something the other doesn't? That's asymmetric information. There are 2 main flavors of this failure. Adverse selection. This occurs before a transaction. Think about the market for used cars or health insurance. A seller of a used car knows if it's a lemon, but the buyer doesn't. Or, a person with a pre-existing medical condition knows they'll be a heavy user of insurance, but the insurance company doesn't. The lack of information on the part of the insurer can cause them to raise premiums, driving healthy people out, making the problem worse. Moral hazard. This occurs after a transaction. If a homeowner has insurance, they might be less careful about locking doors, because the cost of loss is borne by the insurer, not themselves. The insured party acts in a riskier way because they are protected from the consequence. What then is the failure? The market either shrinks significantly, like the lemons car market, or participants take on excessive risk, leading to an inefficient equilibrium. How to fix it? Warranties, contracts, signaling, like getting a degree to show competence, and government regulations, like requiring disclosure forms. The fifth case, common property resources. Finally, we have resources that are rivalrous but non-excludable. Think of a public fishing ground or a crowded highway. Rivalrous. My use directly subtracts from your ability to use it. The fish I catch is one fewer fish you can catch. Non-excludable. It's often hard or impossible to stop people from accessing it. Because no one owns it, and no one can be stopped from using it, every individual has an incentive to use the resource as much as possible before someone else does. This leads to the famous tragedy of the commons. The resource gets depleted or degraded at an unsustainable rate. The failure. The resource is overused and depleted well below the socially optimal level. How it can be fixed. Defining property rights. Turning common property into private property. Or imposing regulation, like fishing quotas or road tolls. So, the perfectly competitive market is a beautiful idea, but it requires 5 ideal conditions. Perfect competition, no public goods, no externalities, perfect information, and perfect property rights. When any of these 5 conditions breaks down, we get a market failure, justifying government intervention to try and push the economy back toward efficiency.